Okay, so I have been playing through uh The Witcher, Blood and Wine, the DLC. Is really funny. They just announced well, not just, but a little bit ago, they just announced the new DLC for The Witcher 3, which is one of the most mind-boggling uh announcements from from CD Projekt Red. I'm not complaining. I love The Witcher 3. It's a tremendous game, so I'm very excited about that. But I've been playing through Blood and Wine, so uh, there won't really be any spoilers, but I will be talking about a character from Blood and Wine that I really like. Um, and I haven't even beaten the DLC yet, so I don't even know where it all goes. But I was playing through The Witcher, and specifically the Blood and Wine DLC, and something that just struck me so so hard was just how much I liked these characters. That's not an original experience. It's not like I play other games and don't like the characters always. And so I was like, wow, finally, I love characters from a lot of games. But The Witcher in particular, when I was playing through even just the base game, I fell in love so quickly with every single side character that was introduced. Be them a protagonist, antagonist, somewhere in between, as most Witcher characters are. And I was so just continually smitten and charmed and endeared to these characters that appear. And some of them are the scummiest scumbags you'll ever meet, like Dijkstra in the base game. Dijkstra's not a cool, nice guy, but man, do you love him? And so there was one thing in particular that I mean, there's few reasons why I think that the Witcher characters are so likable, and so and why you just fall for them, as it were, so quickly. But the biggest one I think is competence. Um, Competence is huge when you're trying to make a likable character. Oh man, I wish I could remember what it was. Okay, whatever. I'll talk about that later. There's something else I was gonna say, but I can't recall, so it sounds silly trying to talk about it now. But um, competence is so big. Not every likable character needs to be competent, but I will say, if your character is competent at the job that they have, or their duty, or they're skilled in something that is very applicable to the narrative of your story, it's really, really easy to like them. Um, let's take let's talk about, before I get into how that works. Let's talk about how not doing that can make your. Sorry, I'm wobbling all over my desk. Um, let's talk about what happens if you don't do that. If so, when the Mandalorian show came out, I found myself really disappointed by it for a number of reasons. I only watched 2 seasons and I couldn't bring myself to watch anymore because I didn't like it, for one thing. But the biggest thing that really, really irked me was how they were introducing this Mandalorian character, you know, as this like elite merc, right? He's this like, I'm probably getting the lore wrong. I'm sure some people are like, yeah, well, he's not a merc, but you know what I mean. He's this elite soldier, right? He's incredibly skilled, incredibly competent, all this stuff. I'm like, cool, awesome. I was expecting kind of like a Jango Fett character, right? Boba Fett, not just because of the aesthetics, but like these guys that are cool, competent, collected. Well, okay, it's funny because like as cool as Boba Fett is, everyone's like, oh, Boba Fett's awesome. He has so little screen time and he dies in Return of the Jedi, and it's extremely quick. But still, the point was that watching Mandalorian, I was expecting the Mandalorian to be very smart, be very clever in combat, and not lose all the time. Do you want to know what happens all the time in that show? He loses all the time. All the time. In like the first episode, doesn't he get like gangbanged by a bunch of Jawas or something? Jawas, the little guys. I was so baffled by that creative decision. Maybe I'm totally misremembering. So I could be totally wrong, but I swear I haven't seen it in since it came out. But I swear every episode of that show, he gets like sidelined or shafted by people that are way better than him, and they shouldn't be better than him. These are Jawas on a sandbar. They deal in robots, right? They're not mercenaries, and he's supposed to be this elite guy, and he can't even take on like 4 Jawas. Anyway, and that happens throughout the show, and I just remember being so disappointed because I was like, this guy's supposed to be cool. They're telling me he's cool. I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it anywhere. The only reason he's cool is because his helmet's cool, because his outfit's cool. And then he proceeds to take it off later anyway. Sorry, spoilers. He proceeds to take it off anyway, and that ruins that illusion. Anyway, so that's There'd be a million. I could talk forever about why I don't like The Mandalorian. A lot of those shows. Whoa, that was crazy. But that was like my biggest like issue with the show was just how it bungled his character into a being kind of incapable. And it made me not like him because I was just like, I don't expect this guy to do anything or accomplish anything. I feel like he's going to bumble his way through to victory. There's some characters where that's fun. Indiana Jones is an extremely fun character because he's extraordinarily competent when it comes to wits and smarts for history. He's not a really good fighter. And as an action star, he kind of bumbles his way through everything, and that's part of the charm because he makes up for it in a lot of other ways. Um, and so there's a charm to that, right? I don't want to say that you can't have your character can't be likable if they're not competent. I think that's really important to distinct. But the thing about Indiana Jones is he's not a competent fighter necessarily. He is a very competent, historian and archaeologist, right? Like that's the trade-off. But back to The Witcher. Let's talk about why the Witcher characters are so good. They're competent and they take action. I was playing through the Blood and Wine DLC and I met Regis, the vampire. And man, I love all the side characters in The Witcher, but Regis was like far and away the most compelling, interesting, charming side character that I've met in a game in a very long time. He is so intelligent. He's so wise. He doesn't get riled up. He and Geralt have a great chemistry, so obviously that helps. They have a history, which also really really helps to make characters likable. Um, but he's so smart and he does things. That is huge. In RPGs, there is a sort of default that a lot of the RPGs fall to where you as the main character do everything that's important, right? So you are always the one making the big decisions. You are always the one doing the big quests and doing important things. I was so astounded when there was a moment in the DLC, and this happens all throughout The Witcher, in the base game and everything, but there's a moment in the DLC when you and Regis, your vampire buddy, are talking. Now, it totally helps, by the way, that he has a super nice voice. That presentation is also really important, but I'm trying not to. Anyway, that's another thing. But you and Regis are discussing what your plans are to hunt to find this vampire that you're looking for, and you talk about two different things that you need to do. We need to do this and we need to do these two things. And they're big tasks. And in my player brain, in my RPG wired brain, I was fully expecting to do both of them. And because they were both big things, interesting things to do. And then Regis is like, okay, you do this, I'll do that. And I was like, huh? So Regis is going to go off and have an adventure by himself? He's going to have a main character moment. I'm not even going to be there to see it. And I'm sure, you can find a way to be disappointed by that. But I thought it was awesome because Regis suddenly he's his own character. He's doing stuff. He's taking initiative. He's taking charge. And he knows what he's doing. He's not bumbling through this. And it just made me respect his character more so that I was more keen to listen to him because I felt like he knew what he was talking about. I felt like he knew what he was doing. So it's this really fun thing that The Witcher does all the time where all of these characters that you meet are super competent in one way or another. Triss is a really accomplished, sorceress, and she's really, anyway, she's awesome in some way, and Yennefer's awesome in other ways. Yennefer's crazy, but that's another topic. And Dijkstra, I love Dijkstra so much. My goodness, that guy's awesome, but he's a scumbag. He's a total scumbag, But every character in The Witcher is like that. It's why when you ask like Witcher fans, like The Witcher 3 fans, like what their favorite characters, like you hear like 19 different answers from everybody because everyone in that game is so cool. People will be like, I love the Baron, I love Dijkstra, Triss, Yen, what's her name? What's the witch that uses you? It's not really narrowing it down, is it? What's her name? Oh, I honestly kind of wanted to romance her, and I was disappointed that I mean, you kind of can, but you can't really. What's her name? She's like, you meet her before you even meet Triss and Yen in the game. She's blonde. When you meet her, she's like bathing in like her underground awesome bath. What is her name? Anyway, she's awesome. But all these characters are so charming, and I feel, and I'm not trying to say that there's not other reasons why. There's lots of other reasons why. The writing is just spectacular in that game, but the competence is through the roof. Nothing is worse than playing as like a character who is not competent, but also does not make up for it in a lot of other ways. I'm trying to think of examples, but I'm having a hard time. I might have to come back to this. Is it obvious I don't script these things? I really just sit down and start yapping away. But anyway, my takeaway here: competence is, we'll make it rhyme, or alliteration. Competence is key, right? Competence is key, spelled with a C. Um, it's it's so, I think, underutilized. It feels great to play as someone who knows what they're doing. I've been playing through The Last of Us Part Two, shocking no one. I've been playing through that game again, and Ellie is a really fun character because while this is a tremendously awful revenge arc that you are following, you cannot help but have some sort of begrudging respect. And you obviously are playing as her, so you have that, like, you are tied into the narrative, so you care. But you cannot help but sort of begrudgingly respect her ability to survive, adapt, and kill. Like, it is as disturbing as it is. It's extremely impressive. And I think that's really important too. Sometimes a character can be really competent in a way that is disturbing or upsetting to you as the viewer or the storyteller or the player, and that's really fun too. It's fun to be impressed. It's why people like, like, there's that scene in Rogue One, um, at the end of Rogue One. Spoilers for Rogue One if you haven't seen that decade-old movie. The scene where that scene did more for Darth Vader at the end of Rogue One than basically any other bit of Star Wars has ever done, except for that one bit in that bad Star Wars show where he like force stops the ship from taking off. That was that one pretty crazy. Um, but that scene where Darth Vader just cuts through these rebels, we hate to root for him because he's the bad guy, but I mean, he just looks so cool doing it, right? Like, the coolness factor is big, and competence is part of that. He's terrifying, but man, is he good at it, right? Like, and so even if you can recognize that what the character is doing is bad, evil, misaligned, or malignant, or negative in some way, if they do it in such a competent way, that makes for really that is compelling. That makes you like a character. It's why, if you have a villain that's not intimidating, they don't stick around in your brain, right? They're not interesting to you, and you might not care about them. And some people, when they design villains, they lean too hard into the, let's make them good at fighting and nothing else. I recently watched Supergirl, again, spoilers for Supergirl, and that was one of the biggest issues I found with the villain in Supergirl, was that he was not competent in anything other than fighting. Like, that was his like feature, was that he was like Killmonger from Black Panther, but with like studs instead of just like scars, and he was good at fighting, right? And that's a trap that I think a lot of movies and games fall into, is that like the only thing that makes a villain competent is that they're good at fighting, and that's disappointing. I've been reading Game of Thrones, or A Song of Ice and Fire, I should say. I've been reading Storm of Swords, anyway, the fourth one. I've been reading it, and it's so good, by the way. But what makes Tywin Lannister such an incredible villain, everyone kind of is a villain in that book at times, but Tywin is very distinctly, kind of a strong antagonist. But what makes him so interesting is that we never see him lift up a sword. Like, well, that's not true, but we never see him fight, right? But he is the most imposing, intimidating, and competent character probably in the entire book, in all of the books. He is so smart. His fatal flaw makes up for that in a really fun way, right? His pride is so strong that it sort of defeats his competent intelligence, which is what makes him a really composing character, or imposing and compelling character. But he's competent, right? He's so smart. So anyway, I feel like that's just, anyway, this is a big, widespread tangent, but something I just encourage, if you're watching this and you're thinking about writing your own story, writing your own game, whatever, consider where your character's competence lies, whether they're the main character, side character, or an antagonist. If your character isn't competent in anything, maybe reevaluate. I'm not saying that they need to be like, god tier skilled at something. Not everyone needs to be. There are fun, like average Joe characters out there, but if they're not competent, make sure that they make up for it in another way, that they're interesting in another way. But competence is really big, and it's really fun. So yeah, just something I'd recommend, and something that I think about a lot, and I would love to hear other examples that people have of like really competent, interesting characters who know what they're doing, and are interesting because of that, whether they're side characters, main characters, antagonists. So yeah, I'm so glad to be back and recording more videos. I do still want to do that thing that I mentioned in the last one, that project, but I want to make sure I do it right, and I want to make sure it's interesting and that I have something to give, and so it's not just boring slop that I'm putting out. So I'll probably get on that somewhat soon. But yeah, okay, that's it. Bye.